But of course, Ryan, at the beginning, it's Notre Dame and Stanford. And we'll do mailbag at the end. So if you have questions or super chats, throw those suckers in there and we will definitely get to them. Y'all know that. Notre Dame, Stanford time, Ryan.
Yep.
This is a rivalry game. We can debate how strong of a rival, if it would be a rivalry by our terms, but in the traditional sense of the word, it is a rivalry. There's a trophy at stake, right? And I can't remember which one. I think it's like is it the Jules Shalala? I forget what the yes, there it's I forget which. It's one of those things that's at stake for this game. You can tell how serious I am about this rivalry that I don't even remember what it's called. But I'm about to find it here. What they call the thing that they have. It's the
someone just said Legends Trophy.
Legends Trophy. Yeah.
Let's go with
it's
that.
A Dublin Irish crystal ball resting on a California redwood base. I'm reading that from Wikipedia.
Ooh.
So anyway, that's what's at stake in this particular rivalry. It's been one that Notre Dame has they got a 21-13 advantage. Stanford actually is 7-12, or excuse me, 7-5 over Notre Dame in the last last 12 matchups. But Notre Dame has won the last 3, and that came after Stanford had won 3 straight games. So when you look at what is at stake in this game, Ryan, there's sort of 2022 stuff at stake, and then there's a big picture thing. And when I talk big picture first, Ryan, with this game is I know the Jules Shalala is the USC. I know I'm an idiot. I'm sorry, guys. But I knew some West Coast school that I actually cared about, not this one. But I think the big picture one first, Ryan, is really brief. Notre Dame has a shot to kind of just sort of put a nail into Stanford's coffin from it being a rivalry. And when I mean rivalry, I don't mean between the two teams, but kids just aren't going to Stanford over Notre Dame anymore. And that was really what was happening during the Jim Harbaugh and early parts of David Shaw is not only did they beat Notre Dame on the field, they were beating Notre Dame on the recruiting trail consistently for big-time kids. It's not really happening anymore, and I think this is the kind of game where if Stanford can pull off an upset, all of a sudden, maybe they can have a little bit of glimmer of hope because they're trying to salvage their season. But I think when you just look at it from a rivalry standpoint, I think this is kind of if they beat Stanford and if they beat Stanford the way that they should, that's now 4 straight blowouts. I think it's no longer a competitive thing, and you're now looking at Stanford as being on the same level as a Duke and a Northwestern when it comes to recruiting against Notre Dame.
Exactly. Yeah. They've been kind of the trendy team for a little bit there, right? I mean, we talked about a lot of the guys that had chose Notre Dame in the past, the Thomas Bookers of the world, and working further back, obviously there was a lot more guys that had chosen Stanford at one point over Notre Dame. And it just hasn't been that way, Brian, to your point, over the last couple of years. I mean, Notre Dame just took a kid from Stanford this 2023 cycle in Armel Mukam, right? So it's just something where Notre Dame has definitely distanced themselves, but I agree. It could be a nail in the coffin, right? Like, let's call it like that. They can completely separate themselves, and they are by far the high academic institution that also plays, a high level of football, which it always should be at the University of Notre Dame. So I think that's the separator, man. And then also over encompassing is that you're a much better team than Stanford, much more talented team than Stanford. Yes. Like, you don't mess around and make this a contest, make this a game, make us come up with, we won't come up with excuses, but make others come up with excuses after the game of why it was too close at the end, right? Put the nail in the coffin, foot on the throat, whatever wording that you want to use for this one. Notre Dame is a much more talented team than Stanford, and it has to show on Saturday to show that there is growth here.
Short term, I think that's the big picture here for this game for Notre Dame, right? It's the growth. And I saw someone in the chat saying they have a hard time seeing Notre Dame winning this by 10 because they haven't shown the ability to dominate games. I disagree. I think they have shown the ability to dominate games. I think they haven't shown the ability to finish those dominant games off. They did beat North Carolina by 13 on the road. North Carolina is a significantly better football team than Stanford.
Yes.
Beat BYU last week by 8. Again, it's a game we've talked about it, you stop them on 3rd and 17, that's a 20-something point victory. At what point does it become, if you do this, that happens, right? There's got to come a point in time where we've got to stop having the conversation of, well, if they would have done this, if they would have done that, they'd have won by X number of points.
Right.
It's time to say, okay, yeah, you did it, right? And I think that's the thing that's at stake is it's a momentum building game. It's a statement game of saying, hey, look, yeah, We're not happy about what we did the first 2 weeks, but we're not that team anymore because
Right.
I'm saying this as well. I mean, I did my Irish breakdown top 25. I think some of the AP and coaching votes last week were just stupid. You're going to have BYU at 4-2 over, significantly higher votes than Notre Dame after Notre Dame just completely outplayed them for 57 minutes and won the game on a neutral field. Baylor's ahead of them. Why? You know what I mean? And
Baylor just lost to West Virginia last night.
Right, but this was before. Yeah. This is before that.
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, Baylor's not that good. And Notre Dame lost to Marshall. And my answer was, well, but who did they beat though? Right, but it's that stigma of the Marshall loss is still there. I think if you can go out there and just dominate Stanford, then you can. We're now a month past the Marshall game. They've now won 4 straight games in a row, all against Power 5 teams or about to be a Power 5 team because BYU's about to be one. Next year they joined the Big 12. They were a ranked opponent. You say, hey guys, that's in the rear view, right? Yeah, it's impacted our season clearly, but it's in the rear view. And I think a close game over Stanford makes you think, like, are they really that much better than the team that barely beat Cal? I don't think you can make that case if it's a 7 to 8 point win that you let Stanford hang around, because this is not a good football team. It's a team with some talent, but there's a difference between having some talent at spots and being good, and they're not a good football team. So if they can do what they're supposed to do to a team like that, Ryan, then we can look at this team and say, okay, they're ascending. Then you build on it with UNLV next week. Then you have a lot of confidence going into Syracuse the following week. Now, all of a sudden, if you're able to run that table, now all of a sudden you're 6-2. You've won 6 in a row. You're playing great football, and here comes top 5 Clemson. So I think that's what's at stake for Notre Dame in this game is keep rolling. As you said the other day, Ryan, don't slip up. And slipping up isn't just about losing. That's an obvious slip up, but it's also about lose the momentum, develop bad habits that a team can an undisciplined team that lacks leadership can develop bad habits where they don't play well against teams that they know they're going to smash or think they should smash. And so they don't put them away the way they should because they don't have the leadership, the maturity as a football program, a football team to handle their business the right way. Does this team have that? We're going to find that out on Saturday. Because the reason the last 2 teams were able to battle back is because they're good teams. And Notre Dame made mistakes. Stanford's not a good team. And so you need to treat them like a team that's not very good. And you're a team that is good and knows you're good and knows you have a mission in front of you, and they are standing in your way. And that's how you treat teams like Stanford. If Notre Dame can have that mentality, then I think they can win this game convincingly. If they don't, then it's going to look a lot like the Cal game and the BYU game where, an inferior opponent was allowed to hang around longer than they should have.
Yeah. Brian, we talked about it yesterday, right? A key is obviously to start fast because we have known throughout this entire season, if you look at Stanford, they have not been a second half team, man. Like they have just fizzled down the stretch of football games. So get on them early. And then let them fizzle, man. Let them be who they are. That's like the main thing for me, right? You want to play Notre Dame football, but also make Stanford play exactly the way they've been playing, man. Like, don't let them have a get-right game. Don't let it get to that point, right? So, yes, it is a situation where you know that Notre Dame's more talented. Notre Dame has been trending upward the last couple weeks. They've had exponential growth consistently over the last 3 weeks, if we're being honest, right? So having that exponential growth needs to continue. Look, you started out the season 0-2. We've talked about this a ton, right? You are at rock bottom after you lose against Marshall. From there, though, it would have been very easy for Notre Dame to quit, right? And it would have been very easy to lose the locker room. It would have been very easy for all these players to just kind of mail it in a little bit. The fact of the matter is that they're playing hard, right? They're playing tough football. And Notre Dame has responded, right? Like you cannot sit here and say that Notre Dame has not had urgency over the last couple weeks and played better and shown resilience, right? But this is the next step in resilience is to blow out a team that you should blow out, right? Don't make them a better team than they are. Make it a statement game if you're Notre Dame. This game should not be close. And we'll get into our predictions. I think we're both on the same wavelength in the sense that, like, hey, talent-wise, this game isn't close at all. Notre Dame needs to have a killer instinct. They need to put their foot on the throat, and they need to end this football game early. Do that, and we'll be talking Saturday nights with a lot of optimism moving forward.
Right. That's what we haven't seen from this team yet. That's the one. I mean, we've seen that the offense can be really good when it wants to be. We've seen the defense can be really good when it's plays smart. We've seen that they can go on the road and beat a good football team. They can go on a neutral field and beat a good football team. What we haven't seen is two things, Ryan. Can you blow out a team that you're supposed to blow out and play like you are a legit top 10 team, right? They're not a top 10 team from a ranking standpoint. If you beat Stanford, you're not a top 10 team anyway because of your resume is not top 10. But they are a top 10 team in my opinion. They are a top 10 team that hasn't played like it. They have the top 10. Look, their roster to me is still one of the 10 best in the country, in my opinion. It flat out still is, right? Now, has everybody played to their potential, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? We're not saying that. We're not saying they should be a top 10 team, but they are a top 10 team from a talent standpoint. Go play like it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what USC did in 2016, which is why I've compared this team to that team. By the end of the season, nobody wanted to play USC. Had 3 losses. Yeah. Blowout loss to Alabama, double-digit loss to Stanford, lost to Utah, right? They were not a good football team early, but they became a really good football team. And that's what we need to see from Notre Dame. And how do you play at home? Notre Dame has not played well at home in front of their home state. And that is a thing. That is a thing about a program that, you're at home. And Marcus Freeman said it before the BYU. Look, right now we are kind of playing better away from home because it's less distractions and all that other kind of stuff. Well, you're going to have to learn to not be distracted at home and figure out how to play well at home because you got a couple pretty good teams coming to your home place here over the next couple months. That's going to be a big part of it too, Ryan. So